Okay. So our speaker tonight is Sheila Lachance. Am I pronouncing your name right? Is it Lachance? Lachance? Okay. Originating from the great Pacific Northwest, Sheila was raised in the burbs of Portland, Oregon. Granddaughter of a preacher and daughter of a teacher, the art of speaking and writing became an integral part of her DNA. A Toastmaster since 2003, she has now become dedicated to mentoring individuals that are willing to do the diligent work in reaching their potential as effective communicators. After her husband Robert Feinberg's passing in 2019, she compiled his short stories into a self-published book now available on Amazon entitled The Musings of a Madman I Married, Inspiration to Tell Your Story. Now, it's time to tell her story. Originally her icebreaker speech at Toastmasters, please help me welcome Sheila Lachance.
Thank you. Join me back in time to the year 1991. As a divorced woman with one child, I was raising my daughter on my own. My ex-husband is another story. We won't go there now. I was struggling financially. I had to count every coin. So when I found my daughter's favorite breakfast cereal on sale, buy one box, get 2 boxes free, I was ecstatic. Pay dirt. I loaded up the grocery cart and trotted happily home to my daughter. Look, sweetie, I have not 2, but 3 boxes of your favorite breakfast cereal. Well, she looked up at me pensively and said, Mom, I don't like that kind of cereal anymore. I'm changing my life. What? Changing your life? You're 6 years old. First, you have to have a life before you change it. Actually, I didn't say that, but I thought it for certain. This is one of my many stories that I keep in my kit bag. Breakfast cereal. No one can take this memory away. You can steal my pocketbook, confiscate my credit card, but you can't steal my stories. They are who I am, and your stories are who you are. While raising my young daughter, I centered my world around her. She was the nucleus of my universe, the center, the heart, the hub. This fact determined where I worked and who I dated. Where I worked, Western Family Foods corporate office. The sales vendors would leave grocery samples for the employees. This helped out with our limited food budget enormously. Northwest Occupational Medical Center. Sure thing. Handy for any medical care my daughter and I should need. And the doctors even allowed me to do my laundry at work. We saved copious amounts of quarters. Real estate sales. Perfect. I could maintain a flexible schedule and be there for my daughter at any given moment or her beck and call. However, the ramifications of these various industries had a downside. My resume was directionless, a path leading nowhere. Instead of being linked in, I was linked out. Who would I date? Anyone that understood my daughter would be the center of my universe, and he would have to orbit around my daughter and I. I steadily dated the same guy for 5 years until his spacesuit ran out of oxygen. Before I could catch my own breath, time rocketed forward as fast as a guided missile. As I witnessed my world blow out her 18 birthday candles, I realized that soon she would orbit herself out of my reach and rocket into outer space, also known as going away to college. My world would change. What now? 2003, I joined Toastmasters. Why? I wanted to write, so I joined to tell my story. I stayed to hear other people's stories. And a big part of Toastmasters is about sharing stories. 2008, I meet Robert Gene Feinberg, a brilliant man. Robert was a prolific writer. In the 1980s, he authored a published book about the perils and pitfalls of running. Now, being an avid jogger and marathon runner himself, this made him a contrarian. The book's title, Jogging, the Dance of Death. We married in 2011. Though brilliant and talented, he was also a tortured soul. He suffered from mental illness nearly his entire life. He called it his big black dog of depression, and that dog continually nipped at his heels. But he loved to write stories. He wrote stories from his life, childhood stories, stories with American history as the backdrop, humorous stories, stories of his time spent in a mental institution, philosophical stories from daily life. When I suggested he get these published, he said, no, they were only meant for you to read out loud to me if I should lose my mind, my memory, myself. He knew we are our stories and you are your story. There's good news. He did not lose his mind nor his memory. However, when he was under hospice care, I did read him his running book aloud. After reading the last page and closing the book's cover, he said, man, that guy's a good writer. When that brilliant and talented man passed away in 2019, my story changed again. I believe his stories were meant to share with the world, and keeping them to myself is like harboring a golden goose in my pockets, screeching and squawking away and kicking to be set free. So, in 2020, I self-published his stories in a book entitled The Musings of a Madman I Married, Inspiration to Tell Your Story. Sharing your story invites others to share their story. Stories connect us, and human nature craves connection. To connect is to love, and understanding our stories is the beginning of a love that never, never ends. The book and I have a mission. I will explain. Let's travel back in time a bit. It was January 16, 2019, just a few weeks before his passing. He lay under hospice care. He clearly spoke 3 words to me. No, not I love you, although I knew he did love me. He said quite clearly, quite lucidly, encourage the world. Encourage the world. His words created a clear direction to follow. His words created a path for the journey going forward. His words created my personal mission statement. His words changed my story. Encourage the world. Endings are often disguised as new beginnings. 2020 arrives, and along with it, the pandemic. This became the procuring cause of the premature push to the preponderance use of a virtual world. How's that for an alliteration? I didn't even take a breath. Now I can. Toastmasters was now virtual. Toastmasters was truly international. Toastmasters was Zoom on steroids. Still, me, wanting to write stories and hear other people's stories while encouraging the world, I remain active in Toastmasters. And this too changed my story. I meet Hollywood Joe. We become friends. Through Joe, I meet Bywin Lee. We become friends. With Joe's win with passion to Bywin's one door closes, one door opens, I could accurately say, one door closes, many doors open. World encouragers unite. Endings are often disguised as new beginnings. we change, our stories change. Back to my breakfast cereal story. In 1991, my 6-year-old daughter told me she was changing her life by changing her breakfast cereal preferences. In fact, she was changing her narrative. She was changing her story. My late husband wrote, "The narrative you create in your mind is the story of your life." The narrative you create in your mind is the story of your life. Now it's your turn to change the narrative you have created in your mind. Stories change. It's your call. It's your story, after all.